George Norrie with L.A. Marzulli back with us, author, lecturer, filmmaker. He has penned many books, including the Nephilim trilogy, received an honorary doctorate for the series from the Pacific International University. He has lectured on the subjects of UFOs, the Nephilim, ancient prophetic texts, presenting his exhaustive research. He's got a series of DVDs out. Latest is The Coming UFO Invasion. You're scaring me, L.A. You're scaring me. Welcome back.
George, I got to tell you, this might be the most important film I've ever made, and I realize that sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. And when I started filming it, I really didn't know what I was getting into. I mean, I had a rough idea of what I wanted to talk about was, of course, the abduction phenomena, but when I started interviewing the people that make up the film, it was a whole different thing, and it was some of the interviews are incredibly visceral.
Well, you make a lot of reference to Dr. David Jacobs, who's been on our program many times, but he believes these UFO situations are not very friendly.
And I completely concur with his assessment. We actually show the clip where, which is really interesting because all four of these people that have been abducted, and there's no collusion between them, they all talk about going out the window. And as Dr. David Jacobs says in the film, that's future physics, because we know that you can't go through a window that's closed, at least not with what we know. We would call that something miraculous. And in fact, it is. So whoever is doing it can manipulate space, time, matter, and energy. And the bottom line is this is an incredibly nefarious agenda. And Dr. Jacobs believes the same thing that I do, that there's something else going on here and it's not good.
No, it's not good at all. Now, why do you say, though, that this film could very well be your most important film you've ever done?
Because what it does, the subtitle is Exposing the Dragon's Dark Secrets. And, you know, I'm not only a history buff, but certainly a biblical history buff. And when I look at the prophetic text from Genesis to Revelation, and I've been immersed in this for like 43 years, looking and trying to figure out, and I think it's what we do in the film, without giving away the farm here, is we expose the dragon's dark secrets, which is in the prophetic narrative found in the Guidebook of the Supernatural, i.e. our Bibles. It's there. It's screaming at us, but you've got to connect the dots. And that's what I think we've done. If I were to tell you what was written 2,500 years ago, and this is one of the punchlines, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. Who are they? Their seed will mingle with the seed of men. And so if you just take that prophecy, which is written 2,500 years ago roughly, by itself, it's like, well, what does that mean? But when you start tying it in with the other prophetic texts, and when you look at what's going on in modernity with the abduction phenomena, and George, I think there are perhaps millions of people who have been taken, millions. In fact, I interviewed a woman today who was taken like until the age of about 13, and then they abruptly stopped. So it's all over the map. And, of course, you can't sit down with the people that are doing this and ask them questions like, well, what's your end game here? But we can only look at the total of what we can see and get all these different witnesses over a period of time, and it begins to paint a picture. And unfortunately, that picture is very dark, in my opinion.
Well, they say, L.A., that hundreds of thousands of people on the planet disappear every year. I mean, merely just simply disappear. Now, some of them have been murdered, of course, but not that many. Where do they go?
No, and this is the work of David Paulides, and I completely concur with him. Something really dark is going on here. When you look at the amount of children that go disappearing, or that just disappear, or as you said, just people, especially in the national parks. Something is going on. And in the film, one of the abductees, her name is Karen. She was taken multiple times. And she talks about when she's a child, like 6, 7 years old, she begins to tell people about what's going on. They're taking me. We're doing things to me. And when she's re-abducted, they threaten her.
Jeez.
And they basically show her family being decapitated. And what they do to her sister, they show her sister being killed in a fiery car crash. And, of course, her sister, when they're back at the house, her sister, like, wakes up and she's, like, screaming, wakes up the whole house. But this is how they shut people up, with these screen memories, with these threats. And what do you do with a or 7-year-old kid who's making this stuff up? I don't think so. And Karen's testimony, George, in the film is unnerving, to say the least.
In L.A., I see nothing friendly about an alien abduction case. I mean, years ago when I talked with Bud Hopkins and Dr. John Mack, of course, the theory was always, what could be friendly about abducting somebody, taking them from this planet, bringing them back perhaps, but what's so good about that? I don't see any upside.
When I was at the UFO conference in Vernal, Utah, this past summer, and there's about 350 people there, nice crowd, and I asked them, how many of you in the audience think that it's okay to abduct a 5-year-old boy and implant them with a chip? Raise your hand. Not one hand went up, George, not one. And I looked at them and I said, you're proving my point before I even start my presentation, because, I'm coming at it from a completely different viewpoint than what most of these people who are, sort of new age or believe that these are space brothers and all this. And I'm flailing my arms wildly saying, this is incredibly dark, it's nefarious, and here's the proof. And that's why this film is so important. Because when you hear the people's testimony in the film, Al Matthews, who's been taken since he was a child, same thing with Emil. Emil's been taken since he was a child. Karen, same thing with her. And there's no collusion between the 4 people. Angela, we're not sure when she was taken, but because, they have a tendency to black out your memory and you don't remember, but she does remember being taken. And her testimony also is incredible. And George, Art Bell talked about this stuff decades ago.
Yep. And
this was like major tinfoil hat conspiracy stuff. Hardly anybody believed it. When I started reading about it and studying it in the 90s, it was like, whoa, wait a minute. And then when I started to talk about it at conferences right around the year 2000, people looked at me like I had 3 heads. Now, Abby Hornacek on Fox News, right, from the Fox Network, has a program about alien abductions. So all of a sudden what was tinfoil hat and conspiracy theorists, now people are starting to look at it. That's why we did the film, because we really want to get to the bottom of it, and I think we did.
We're talking about the possibility of ET races being friendly or not. What do you think of that possibility, or are they all evil?
Well, the people that we've talked to, that I've talked to, and here's the deal without mentioning any names, because they're not here to defend themselves. There's a great researcher. I love this guy. I've interviewed him. He has a book out, and he interviews this woman who's a lifelong abductee. And she has, in my opinion, is classic Stockholm Syndrome. It's like, Patty Hearst and the Symbionese Liberation Army. The next thing you know, the heiress is holding an AR-15 and she's wearing a beret and she's running with the terrorists.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Stockholm Syndrome. Everybody we've ever talked to, everybody that's been abducted, that's been violated, most people, I shouldn't say everybody, most people look at this and they want out. They don't want any part of this. But then you get the people that side with them. I remember talking to a woman, won't mention her name, and she actually heard me on Coast to Coast and emailed me the next day. And we struck up a conversation. And I basically told her, she told me her whole testimony, and she voiced the skull. They would tell her, come on out and take pictures of a ship. And she showed me some of the pictures. She was like in communication with them, face to face, the whole deal. And I said, basically, they will eventually kill you. She was down to under 90 pounds. And the reason why she reached out to me, because she heard me on your show talk about these entities, that they have a nefarious agenda. They will feed your ego. They will tell you have something important to do, that you've been chosen. Everything I said on that interview with you, George, resonated with this woman, and she came across the line. And she realized that she was being deceived. And my take is this, that those people who believe that these are benevolent, space brothers, it's basically deception. They have been deceived. And Dr. Jacques Vallée, Messengers of Deception, whether he still holds to that paradigm, I don't know. But in the book, he certainly puts that forward and espouses that. And, of course, you got Dr. J. Allen Hynek, which believed that this was all linked back and looked more like something from demonological stuff than it does Space Brothers. So that's my take on it.
Is it conceivable that governments know what is going on with the nefarious reason, and that's one of the reasons why they don't tell us anything?
I think our government knows exactly what's going on. I think that the powers that be have been in cahoots with them literally for decades. Certainly, Roswell, I sat down with Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr., and I interviewed him before he passed away. So that's as close to the event as I've ever gotten. I mean, I know Dr. Stan Freeman, Dr. Marcel Sr., so that's really close to the event. But I also talked to two witnesses. They were end-of-life caregivers, and they knew this guy by the name of Colonel Hill. They were taking care of him. And a month before he passed away, he basically spilled the beans. Carolyn, who was it's a husband and wife team, and she asked him one day, what about Roswell? Because this guy was a colonel in the Air Force. He was OSS, which is the forerunner of the CIA. The guy spoke, I think, 2 or 3 different languages, had 4 or 5 different degrees, real brilliant guy. And so she asked him, remember, this is end of life. He dies a month after she asked him this question. What about Roswell? And according to Carolyn, he hung his head and let out a deep sigh and finally looked at her and said, what about it? And Carolyn asked him point blank, was it a weather balloon? And Hill goes, basically goes off the rails and just tells her, no, it wasn't a weather balloon. They had 6 fingers. He was flown from Dallas-Fort Worth to Roswell within 48 hours to try to communicate with the one alien, so-called alien that was still alive. And he wasn't able to do it. And they had 6 fingers, large heads. They were wearing silver suits, all this stuff. I mean, it's there. He also told her that the wreckage was flown to Wright Pat. How many times have we heard that?
Exactly.
And so it's as close. For me, it was like, okay, it's a step away. I'm not talking to Hill, but Carolyn did. And the interview is pretty riveting. So, look, I mean, the government has known about it for decades. And I posited this years ago that the old guard from the Roswell days, they're all dead. So you've got this group of guys that are putting the kibosh on everything, that are not letting the information out. Project Blue Book and J. Allen Hynek and all the disinformation, guys like Philip Glass, it doesn't exist. It's swamp gas and all the stories we've heard for decades. Well, the old guard dies, and everything changes. And we're watching it change, and we're watching it roll out. And, we are moving up the rungs of the disclosure ladder to, at some point, complete and utter full disclosure. And when that happens, the entire globe changes. Everything changes.
Well, and they realize that people like watching and listening to this kind of material, and it's smart radio and it's smart television. Well, it certainly draws people in, but on the other hand, I think people are so inundated with everything that's going on that there's almost like a laissez-faire attitude with it. It's just like, Star Trek, we've been hearing all this stuff for years. Who cares? And the late Dr. Roger Lear used to say jokingly, if a UFO landed on the 405 freeway in Los Angeles, people would be going, what the heck is that? Get that out of here. Exactly.
I got to go for dinner. And, he used to say that tongue-in-cheek, but in some ways he's right. Look, my phone doesn't ring off the hook. I don't get a gazillion emails from people. I get some. The more emails I get are from people who are abducted or implanted and want to know how to get out. That's the mainstay of what we really deal with. Or that it's some sort of an encounter and trying to fit it into their paradigm, trying to fit it into their worldview. How does this work? What am I looking at? Why were they able to do this? Those kind of questions.
The late Dr. Roger Lear, of course, would remove implants from people. Some might have been aliens, some not. Who knows? And he's surely missed. But you have him as part of this program.
I do, because Emil, his real name, came in on the record with the late Richard Shaw and I and the late Dr. Roger Lear. Emil comes on the record in this film. Emil was the man who we took the implant out in our Watchers series. So now it's like, 7-8 years later, and Emil sits in front of the camera, and when we're not pixelating his face, and he comes forward, and he tells us exactly what happened to him as a child. And this is why the film is so visceral, because you're looking at these folks, and you can see, when I asked Karen and Emil, well, give us your last thoughts. And Karen tells what her thoughts are. Same thing with Emil. obviously separately, different locations, because there's no collusion. They didn't meet till the very end with the Zoom chat. And I held the camera there, and I left it in deliberately, because you can see Karen's face, the brokenness that's there, not the PTSD, but the tension.
Right.
The same thing with Emil. And they're not saying it, they're just looking at the camera. And what's unnerving about that, as a viewer, I've had several people who have previewed the film and go, "Why did you do that?" Because it's very uncomfortable. And I said, precisely. It allows the viewer to experience a little bit of their pain, because all of a sudden they're uncomfortable looking at these people who have undergone something that's, look, they're violated in every possible way that you can imagine. Sperm is taken from the men, ovum is taken from the woman. In Karen's case, she was abducted numerous times from 6-year-old on. She had 3 children by them, George.
Wow.
And here's the deal. She says this, and Angela, the other female abductee in the film, she had her child taken from her. And Karen says that was the first time. So she knows she's pregnant. It's in the 3rd month of the pregnancy, and this is classic Dr. David Jacobs and Mac and the whole crew. They knew about this decades ago. Classic stuff. She's abducted in the 3rd month of her pregnancy, and they take the baby. But she doesn't know that. And she wakes up, and she's got cramps, and she's not feeling good. So she goes to the emergency room. They perform an ultrasound on her, and they go in, no heartbeat, ultrasound, no heartbeat, DNC, no fetal tissue.
No baby.
And the doctor looks, no baby. And they look at her and go, "Are you sure you were pregnant?" And she goes, "Yes, you can call my OBGYN." She saw the heartbeat. Same thing with Angela. The exact same thing. In the 3rd month of her pregnancy, all of a sudden she wakes up, she goes to the emergency room, and no heartbeat, no fetal tissue, nothing's there. Nothing's there. But they saw the baby in the womb with the ultrasound several weeks earlier. It's classic. And then Karen was taken 2 more times, impregnated by them, and they took the children. Here's the kicker to this. 20 years later, she's remarried. She has another family. She's got, another family with another husband. The abductions have stopped for decades now, right? She stopped them.
Yeah.
By giving her life to Jesus. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's what you do. And if that's true, then we're looking at something which is interdimensional, not extraterrestrial. But that's the whole point. 3 of the 4 abductees in this film have all given their lives to Jesus and stopped the abduction phenomena.
Well, that sounds satanic, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, people can either believe that or not. That's the whole point of the film, that there is a way out. So she's laying in bed. It's about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. She wakes up. Guess who's in the room? She thinks it's her boys. She looks closer. She realized it's not her boys. They're shorter. They're stocky. They've got large head and black eyes. And they're looking at her with unmitigated hate, just right in her face hate. And she looks at them and she realizes these are the ones. These are the hybrids. And they're here. And she wants nothing to do with them. Absolutely nothing to do with them. And on camera, she looks right, and you can see her. She's choking up. She's starting to cry. And she's saying, but they're part of me. Maybe they've got some good in them. But she realizes that they don't. And all the people I've interviewed over the decades of my research, many of them have said the same thing. It's like they're soulless, the Greys. They don't care about you. They just do whatever they want to do. They're soulless entities. One abductee said it's like looking in the eyes of a rattlesnake. Now, how is that good? How is that the
That's
Space
right.
Brothers?
Are they robotic?
Well, the Greys are. The Greys are definitely robotic, and I remember talking to the late David Flynn about this. This is decades ago, and saying, could these be avatars? And in a book by David Preston, he talks to this lifelong abductee. Her name is Dolly, and Dolly, in the very first chapter, talks about the Greys, how they are like avatars, how they can be stacked. And I posited that years ago. That, and this is kind of weird for some people. Demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. The Nephilim are the progeny of fallen angels and the women of earth. It's the reason for the flood. All the megalithic sites around this planet were, in my opinion, were created by the Nephilim.
Just like alien abductions, L.A., just like that. This truly ties into biblical prophecy, it seems, L.A.
Here's the deal. We know, and this is written thousands of years ago, where this ancient prophetic text says this, Genesis 3:15, looking at the dragon, your offspring, your seed, will be at war and enmity with the offspring, the seed of the woman. It's right there. So we know it's a seed war. Thank you, Gary Stearman. That's exactly what it is. It's the offspring of the dragon versus the offspring of the woman. Thousands of years later, the offspring of the woman becomes Messiah for those of us who believe in Jesus and all those prophecies that talk about his first coming. And we're not talking about religion here, we're talking about relationship. That's the first prophecy. But then the seed war erupts. And this is my life's work, as you know, the Nephilim. 3 chapters later, in Genesis 6, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Also afterwards, all the megalithic structures that we see around the globe that Graham Hancock tours, and I go to the same places. Brian Forrester's talked about it. Places like Sacsayhuaman, Tim Alberino talks about it. Lots of researchers, Eric von Daniken's talked about it. In my opinion, fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. So you've got those first two scriptures. But then fast forward thousands of years later, Jesus is walking around 2,000 years ago, and he says this, it'll be like the days of Noah when the Son of Man returns. He's pointing back thousands of years ago to the days of Noah, and he expects those who hear his words to understand what he's talking about. But you don't understand that unless you understand the seed war. The offspring of the dragon will be at enmity with the offspring of the woman. Here's the punchline. When you finally get to the prophet Daniel, and we already talked about that a little bit, 2,500 years ago, Daniel writes this, but the angel, the messenger, the entity, the good guy, says to Daniel, seal up the words in this book until the time of the end. And then he tells you what the time of the end is going to look like. Men will run to and fro over the face of the earth, and knowledge will increase. That book's been sealed until the 20th century. Now we run to and fro over the face of the earth. Knowledge increases every 6 months. Here's the kicker. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave. The word cleave is a marriage contract, which is what we get in Genesis 6 with the Nephilim. They took wives. They took wives, plural. This is different. This is different. And we know from the prophecy that it happens in the time of the end, when men are running to and fro over the face of the earth, knowledge increases. That book was sealed up for thousands of years until just recently. And that's why we've exposed the dragon's dark secret. It is a breeding program. These hybrid entities are soulless. They are in a fixed state. And every person that we've talked to that's encountered them, for the most part, they all say the same thing. The fear, the unmitigated hate that comes at them. I interviewed a guy from Norway. Summer day, he's with his wife. They're grocery shopping, and they're in the aisle, and they're just, shopping. He looks up, and at the end of the aisle is a very tall woman, platinum blonde hair, and she's looking at him, and she's dressed weird. She's got like a top and a skirt with material that he's never seen before. So he's on alert, and she looks at him, George, with unmitigated hate, and instead of walking down the aisle to him, she slithers, but she's standing upright. He never saw her feet. She floats, slithers down the aisle. She's about 5 feet away.
Jeez.
By this time, the wife is hiding behind the vegetable stand. She sees it too. The hybrid, which is what she was in my opinion, she lifts up her skirt, and she's not wearing any underwear. He turns away, and then he goes, rebuke first and ask questions later. And he rebukes her in the name of Jesus out loud. Boom! Just like that. She's back at the very end of the aisle, looking at him again with unmitigated hate, and in a second, she's gone. She just disappears.
See,
what do you do with that?
I'm intrigued by invoking the name of Jesus does something to these ETs.
We've heard it. Look, I've been in this wheelhouse forever, and I've heard it over and over and over again. I'll give you another story. Guy laying in his bed, right, next to his wife. 2 o'clock in the morning, classic abduction. Being pulled off the bed, UFO brain fog. He's thinking, gee, the covers are leaving. I really don't want to wake my wife up. It's like, hello, you're about to be abducted. He's now hovering over right next to the wall, about 5 feet from the bed. So he's right next to the wall. He knows he's about to go through the wall. He knows that instinctively. He's absolutely terrified. He's a Christian. And he finally calls out, Jesus, help me. Bam, it's like a rubber band. He's brought right back into the bed. The ship is still there for a period of time, and then it leaves. I talked to him the next morning. His pastor called me, and I talked to him, and I got it right from him. And he says, L.A., why? And I said, I don't have any reason. I can't give you that answer. Why it happened to you. But it happens. But the bottom line is this. He broke their hold because these entities are spiritual. They have a nefarious agenda. It ties right into the biblical prophetic narrative, which we just, had a little Bible study here and talked about. This is what's amazing about this guidebook of the supernatural, because that's what I call it, because that's what it is. And it tells us a priori in advance what is going to happen. And here we are. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men. Who are they? That's exactly what we see happening today, George, in my opinion. It's just boom. They are creating a hybrid race. They are walking amongst us. I'll tell you another story. So this guy's in construction. They're going to lunch. He's in a pickup truck. His buddy's next to him in the passenger seat. They go to a Carl's Jr. or a fast food place, whatever, it doesn't matter. They order at window 1. He goes to window 2, getting ready for the food. This woman, nothing strange about her at all, hands the guy the food. He takes the bag, gives it to his buddy over there. That's one order. Mm-hmm. Now he looks over at the woman. She's about to hand him the other bag, and it goes off the rails. Half her face is alien and half is human. They stare at each other for like 1, 2, 3. She knows he sees her, and she covers her face and runs away from the window. There's a coworker in the fast food place who also sees it. Now, I'm not making this stuff up.
Jeez.
I'm not. And these people come on the record. I'm a student of body language. George, they're telling the truth. And the words of Dr. David Jacobs, hybrids are walking amongst us.
What are they doing with us here? I mean, what are they doing working in a fast food restaurant?
They're integrating. They're learning how to integrate. And at some particular time and I don't know the end game, I wish I did, but when they show up in mass, when the UFOs show up in mass, that's when they'll be activated on some level. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know. I'm not privy to that end game, how they're going to actually integrate and work. But they are integrating, and they are working, and they are walking amongst us. There's no doubt in my mind. We're all being prepped for it. The late David Flynn posited that there'd be some sort of a nuclear event, and I was listening to the interviews you were doing before I came on, and one gentleman was talking about Putin and talking about the nukes. Well, that's David Flynn posited that decades ago, that there would be a nuclear event on the planet somewhere, and that would trigger the revealing of the so-called extraterrestrial presence. Just look at Robert Salas. They were hovering around his nuclear base. They switched off the missiles. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not. So it's I think that's the trigger. There'll be some sort of a nuclear exchange on the planet, and that's when they'll show up in mass. And they'll say, we have a DNA upgrade for you. We have free energy, but we're here to usher mankind into a golden era. We will not allow you to destroy yourself. We created all life on this planet. We are your progenitors. That's what they'll say. That's the lie.
L.A. Marzulli, he is one great guest.